All right, so let's go ahead and get our scene set up so we can model this chair. And the first thing I think I want to do is go over to my Modo's preferences. And if you're on the Mac, it's on the left under Modo. If you're on a PC, it's under the Systems menu dropdown. But I want to go over to down here where it says Units. And I just want to make sure that I'm in metric and we're working in centimeters. All right, so that's all I need to do for that. So the next thing I want to do is build a very simple box because I know the size of this chair. I have those dimensions. So building a box is going to make it easier for our backdrop images to line up to. So I'm going to click on the primitive box item there, go to the tool properties. I'm just going to drag that out and pin that up there. And on the size for the X, I'm going to put 79 centimeters. All right, and under the Y, it's going to be 98 centimeters tall. And on the Z, the length of it is going to be 181 centimeters. All right, and I'm just going to click down here where it says apply. And that's all I need to do. And I'm just going to close that panel right there. Now I want to set this on the ground. And how do I do that? Very easily. Ground align. I'm going to click that and click there, and the box now sits flat on the ground plane. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring in our images, and that's a pretty easy thing to do. I'm just going to use my XNView file browser or image browser, but you can use any image browser or any file browser that you can drag and drop from. And so I'm going to first drag this first one in and just drag it onto Modo's viewport there. I'll do the same with the top, and we'll do the side as well. So now I have all three images in Modo, and I can double check that by going to the images clip browser actually and show them there. And I have three backdrop items. Now, which is which? I want to make sure we name these. So this is the front. So I can go here and call this front view. I'll do that. And this one is the top view, I believe. Yep. And then of course we have the side view. There we go. Okay, now we need to line these up to our box. So the front view obviously needs to be projected on a front, which by default it is. The top view, however, we need to switch that to the top view projection. And the side view needs to be, I'll make that the left view. How about that? Okay, so I think we're good there. So now let's take these one at a time and just auto fit them to the cube we just built. So I'm going to just hide the top and side view. I'm going to go to the front item here, the front view backdrop item, and we'll just hit, let's see, uniform size and auto fit. And I don't think I need to keep aspect on this one. We'll see. I'm going to turn off keep aspect and do auto fit one more time. And there we go. Okay. So that fits there. Let's go to the top view. Uncheck keep aspect and uniform size, auto fit. There we go. And the same with the side view. Turn that on. Keep aspect is unchecked. Use uniform size and auto fit. The other thing we need to do, of course, we want to be sure we're seeing through any objects that we're building on our layers here, so we can see our backdrop items. We need to go to the viewport properties panel, hitting the O key or this little cog in the upper right hand corner, and go to click overlay drawing. Okay. And I think we'll be good with that. We may need to click this one as well. Just to be on the safe side, we'll click, this overlay right here. And I think we'll be good. All right. So there we are. Now I'm just going to grab the top one here. Use the W key and just move it to the bottom part of the scene here. And I think we're lined up there. I might even bring it down a little bit because I don't think I need it actually touching that area. And in our side view, let's just move that out a little bit right there. So let me just double check here. I'll go to my left side. I think I need to change that. Let's make that our right side. Okay, so if I go to the right side, yeah. Let's go to perspective. Yeah, so that lines up, that matches up a little bit better. So we'll create the side view will be the right side. All right, so I think that's all we need to do for this one. So let's get started building this chair. And I'm going to start with the profile view here. So I'm going to turn off everything that I don't need. And also with this mesh, I don't really think I need that mesh any longer, but I'll preserve the layer and just delete the polygons. So I'll just select all the polygons and hit the delete key. And now I can use this layer to start building my chair on. All right. So if we look at the chair, it has a very graceful curve to it, which tells me that I should probably just use a curve to start building this chair. So as you can see, I'll go to my curve menu here, and there are a lot of different kinds of curves we can use here. We can use a Bezier curve, a standard curve, or a B-spline. So I think I'll go ahead and start with a B-spline. So I'll just hold the Control-Shift key and go into my right view, right there. And we'll just go ahead and start laying down some control vertices. And by the way, if this is a little bit difficult to see your curve on there, which it will be, we can go ahead and adjust the image here. So what I think I'll do is I will increase the transparency. Drop it way down about like that. And I'm going to invert the image so that the dark lines are white and the white area is dark. So now with that, I can go ahead and just start laying down some curves. 2, 3, 4. Now the curve really doesn't show up until I get the 4th control vertex down here. And 5 right about there. Okay. So I've got very few control vertices controlling this curve, which is what I want. Now, if for any reason you inadvertently added points, you can undo it. Or if you've dropped the tool and you want to go back and edit your curve again, just make sure you're in poly mode and you click on that curve, span of the curve, and your vertices, your control vertices will show up again and you'll be able to edit that curve. Now let me go ahead and take a look at this in perspective view, and it looks like I've got it right on the 0 axis where I want it, and that's fine. So now we want to give some depth to our curve here. And there's a lot of ways we could do that. Now I can go into the polygon mode with my polygon selected there and go to extrude and click on there and activate the tool and just bring that out. And you can see that it did extrude those polygons out there, or at least converted the curve to polygon and then extruded those polygons. However, it did flip them the wrong way, which is not a problem. I can flip those back. But the bigger problem here is that the number of edges that it made. Now, it's kind of hard to see with my grid on, so I'm just going to turn my grid off for now. And I'll go to work plane, never, and never. There we go. Now we can see this a little bit better. Yeah, and that's far too many polygons to work with at this stage of the game here. So I'm going to undo that, and we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to, with the polygon selected, I'm going to use the W key to move it, but By holding down the Shift and Control, I can actually create a copy and move that out. All right. So I've got that there. Now what I need to do is position these two curves so that they're the right distance away from each other. And I can either do that with the top or the front view, and I think I'll do that with the front view. And I'll go ahead and select that curve and hit the W key to bring up the Move tool. I'll move it right about there. Okay, so I'm looking at the, let's look at the front view. And yeah, I can see it's right about there. And then we'll do the same with this one. I'll move this guy over here. And then we're right about the correct width. So now that we have the right width here, we can go ahead and span between these two curves with polygons using the bridge tool. So I've got that one already selected. Let's hold down the Shift key and select the second curve there. And since this is in polygons, I'll go to the polygon toolbox and I'll bridge, and I'll just click in the viewport. Now what you see is that some of the polygons are flipped one way and some are flipped the other way. We could just go down here to align. That's going to flip everything in one direction, but it is facing downwards, and I want these polygons facing upwards. So I'll just hit the F key, and that's going to flip all of them up, facing the correct direction. So the next thing I want to do, I think, is just make a quick adjustment to the front views and the top view of the images here, just so that they're a little more visible for me. And I'm going to go to the transparency and make them about 60%. And then I'm going to invert them so that they're dark against light, but I'm going to take the brightness up as well. So I'm going to make that maybe 50%. There we go. And so that's going to probably make it a little bit easier for me to gauge my lines against the backdrop. All right, before I go any further with this and start editing the shape and form, I want to make sure that I am on center, and that way I can use Symmetry to actually work with this model. So I'm going to go ahead and turn back on the my work plane. I'll just say active and show the grid, and yeah, let's just show the grid. All right. So with that on, I'm going to double click on my polygons there, and I'm going to go over to where it says edit, and I'm going to make sure that it is on center on the x-axis. Now you'll see it shifted slightly, and though it may not be perfectly lined up to the front view, I'm not going to worry about that. I mean, it's close enough for what we need. So, but it is on center. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put a center line right down the middle of this, and I can do that. Jump over to perspective view again, because it's how I prefer to work. I'm going to go over to edges, the edge toolbox. I'm going to go to add loop, and with my tool properties, I'm going to make sure it says split in the middle. And I'm just going to select on any one of these edges, and it will put a center line right down the middle of the chair. Okay, so now that we have our model on center, I'm going to just hit escape a couple of times. We can go ahead and start shaping this. And but I'm going to invoke Symmetry. So it just makes sense, since this model is pretty much symmetrical. I'm just going to work in Symmetry mode. So I'm going to hold down the Option or the Alt key first, and I'll click on the Symmetry button just to bring up the parameters there. Move that out of the way there. And if you look, we can see that our Symmetry is set to X, which is what we want. So with that set to X, close it. Now turn on the Symmetry tool. And as you can see, whenever I click one side, the other side is automatically highlighted. And this is true for edges and also vertices. So now I'm going to just use the Shift Tab key to convert these to Catmull Clarks. And you can see it's a much more smooth and graceful curve there. And now I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm just going to start pushing and pulling edges and vertices to start shaping my model. And I'm going to use the Element Move tool, and just in the deformer toolbox. So I want to make a little bit of a correction here with regards to my backdrop items. The front appears to be showing me the back view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap that from front projection to a back projection. And that doesn't really change anything here in the viewport, but it does when we go to look at it from the front view. If I switch it to the back view, there I can see the polygons of my chair as well as the backdrop image. So we want to make that correction. So just change the front view projection to a projection type of back view, and then probably rename it just to be on the safe side. Okay, that way you'll know to switch to the back view when you want to see this view of the chair. Okay, so again, with the element move tool, just go ahead and just start moving stuff around. And you can play with the center line as well. So now I want to pay a little more attention to this center line here and start shaping that a little bit more. And as you can see by the images here, we have a bit of a little dip in the contour here, and a little more of an arch here, and especially the bottom of the chair here, the seat of the chair, is pretty well dipped in. So you don't really get a clear view of that from the profile view, but it looks more pronounced in a perspective view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and just select my center line there, and I'm going to use what we call a tool called the element push tool. And when I do this, I'm going to actually jump over to a quad view to do this, because that'll let me see the profile and the perspective view simultaneously to do this particular operation. And it's not particularly complicated. I just like to look at the profile while I'm working as well. So with the element push tool, like the element move, you can adjust the size of its influence by simply right-clicking anywhere in the viewport with the mouse and just drag it to the right, and that's going to increase the size of that brush's influence, or that tool's influence. Now if we go to the properties panel and bring that panel up, you can see that the range is 4.75 centimeters, and that's what the I believe the diameter of that range is, or the radius. So if I right click and drag the mouse to the left, it shrinks it down. If I drag it to the right, it increases the size. So I want a pretty good size, actually, right about there, most of the chair size. Then I'm going to select one of the elements here, which will be this element right here, the seat. And you'll see I have a little blue arrow, a little blue gizmo that comes up, lets me click and drag that. And so I will. And as you can see, as I drag that, the influence of that push is focused on the center where I clicked on the element, and tapers off to where that brush influence just kind of dropped off. Okay, so I think that's probably a little bit more than I want to do. Probably maybe right about there, given the diagram here. Let's zoom in on it. Yeah, I think that's not too bad. I might bring it up just a little bit. And the difference between element move and element push is that move lets you move your elements, whether they're vertices or edges or polygons, in any direction that you want, whereas the element push will move them perpendicular to the surface normal, or parallel with which direction that polygon is facing. Now I'm just going to move these down because I'm noticing here that I didn't get quite enough of a dip there. And you'll see because I increase the influence of that tool, everything is around it is moving as well. And let's see, let's go with this one. Let's move that up there. And yeah, I'm much happier with this. Okay. Now we want to go ahead and build this little fin here that's on the chair that acts as the legs, the side legs for the chair. So what I will do is go into a quad view to do this. So by clicking on this little golden arrow in the upper right hand corner, it switches over to a quad view. Now by default, it's your view probably looks something like this, and we want to be sure we set this viewport here to back as opposed to front, which is the default. So set that to back so we can see our backdrop image. And you'll notice too that all of these little viewports are kind of linked together. Now we can set an independent move on these. Of course, I'm holding down the Option key to shift them left and right and up and down, and Control will zoom in and out of each one of the viewports. But if I want to set the independence, all I have to do is mouse over one of the viewports, hit the O key, and right there in the middle where it says Drawing and Control, right in the middle, Viewport Independence, I just click on all three of those guys right there. And so my orthographic views are now, at least this one is now independent. These two are still linked together. I have to do this to one of these as well, independent. So you can set each viewport to very, very specific viewing options here. So yeah, so now each one of those is independent, as is my perspective view. So now let's go ahead and build this little side arm here, or this side leg, as it were. All right, so I'm in edges mode. I'm going to select now these edges. Now this little line here is this line in the middle, so we don't want to select that. We want to select these, and of course I'm in symmetry mode, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key to select those 4 edges. All right, and then I'm going to, under the Edge tab here, we want to extend that edge, or hit the Z key. So I'm going to hit the Z key to invoke the tool, click the viewport to activate that tool, and I'll use that little green arrow to drag it all the way down. Doesn't matter how far you drag it, because we're going to adjust that in a minute. Now we'll notice too that it has this curvature, the same curvature as it had up here, and I want to change that. So I'm going to flatten that out, and I can do a couple of things. I can either snap that to the ground plane, or I can use the trick where we just scale it, bring up the Properties panel, make sure negative scale is not checked, and just grab the yellow handle there and drag it all the way down to the bottom, and that straightens that line out perfectly. Now the other thing we can do is just snap that to the ground plane, and I will go into the Edit Edge tab there, or the toolbox, and where it says Center, I want to center it on the Y-axis. Then that's the Y-axis, so I want to center that, and that's going to put it right on that grid plane there. Click there, and there we are. So now that is sitting on the ground. Now we simply just need to make some adjustments to it to make it look like it's where it's supposed to be. And the first thing I'll do is I'll use the W key to move it, and my handle snaps to one of the sides here, and I'm just going to move it out a little bit. And again, with this, we could also straighten this out a little bit by using the scaling tool. Click on that handle and just drag that in until it stops, and that should be perfectly straight. All right. And of course, we don't want it perfectly straight. We want to sculpture this to match the contour of the leg itself. So what I'm going to do is just activate the Element Move tool under the Deform toolbox. So just grab the edges and vertices and move them where they need to be. Hold on. There we go. This edge has to be that edge right there. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to select all of these edges on the bottom plane here. I'm going to use the scaling tool, but I'm going to set its action center right at the back here. All right. so that as I pull on this handle here, as I scale it in on this axis, this area will scale in more than this area. So let's try it. And there we go. And that's a very elegant sort of curvature to that. Now I do need to go back into my top view here. Oops. My top view here and make some adjustments again. So let's just use the element move tool once again and just move those out. So I'll just grab this one over here. Sometimes your tool handles get in the way of what you're trying to grab if you're trying to grab something else. So you can just use the minus key to shrink those down, the plus key to grow them, and whichever you want to do. Oftentimes I'll select something I really don't need just to get the tool handle out of the way, and then I'll go back and select what it is I was trying to select. So, okay. So I think we're just about there. Okay, I think that works. Now the next thing I want to do is I need to add another edge right in here so we can get this curvature a little more pronounced, okay? So I'm just going to use my add loop tool here under the edge toolbox, and I'm just going to click somewhere in here. And if you have it split in the middle, or split in the middle, it's going to go to 50% and you won't be able to move it. So you want to make sure that that is not checked, so you have the ability to move that edge wherever you want. So I'm just going to move it right about there. And again, I think I need to go ahead and double click on that edge, and I'm going to resize it, scale it. And this time I'm going to move my scaling tool right about there and click in here, and that's going to move both of those ends in. Just get them in the ballpark. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'll use my element move tool, move that up, move this up. And I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to deselect it and drop the tool, just so I can reinitialize the tool and select other elements as well. Is a little bit higher, so I'm just going to bump that up, and those guys, just to get a little bit of an arc here. Because you'll notice that if we look at the picture, the photograph of the actual chair, you can see there is a slight crown here, a slight arc right there. So, and sometimes I'll just sight down the model like this, just look at it edge on and just see what I need to move. I'm going to click that guy and move it up a little bit more. Yeah, just so I get a more graceful curve going there. So yeah, I think you get the general idea. So just keep pushing points around as needed. All right, so I think we need to pay a little more attention to our edges and corners here. And I think that if we look at the original image here, the photograph, we can see that the break line here, where the fin begins to turn downward here, is of course very, very sharp. And ours is rather soft if we look at it here. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, that's easy enough. Let's go ahead and add a holding edge along that that side there, and it's going to mirror on that side as well. So I'm going to go to Add Loop under the Edge tab here, the Edge tab or Edge Toolbox, and make sure that Split in the Middle is not selected. And I'm just going to bring that in and pull that right about. Now, if you go too far, it's going to merge with the next edge. So we want to keep it right about 94, 95%, right about there. I think that works for us. And with this edge here, I think I'm going to bring this up as well to make this a holding edge on this side as well. So I think that's not bad, but I think that would help if I just slid that edge up a little bit. So I'm going to go to Edge Slide, click in the viewport to activate the tool, and just drag the mouse to the left. And that should tighten that up a little bit more. Oops, let's try that more. Right about there. I have it about 9.8% right about there. Okay, now let's take a look at how that changed these contours right here along the front and rear side of the fin. And I'll go to my right view, and that's not too bad. I think that that'll hold up. I might want to take this edge here and just bring that in a little bit. But I do know that I'm probably going to need to add another tight edge right about here to keep this bottom kind of tight, but that's going to straighten out this line a little bit. So but we'll fix that as we go. Add loop, and I'm going to put this loop right down here near the bottom, and that really didn't change that contour too much, so I'm happy about that. And that should have done it on both sides, which I do believe it did. Yes. Okay, so the other thing I want to do here is I notice that this is arced out quite a bit, and I think that's okay, but this area here is kind of flatter, so I want to kind of give that a little bit of an arch as well. So I'm just going to go to my edges, and I'm going to deselect these two by holding down the control, these two end edges. I'm just going to move that out just a little bit. And actually I probably just want to move this center vert out. There we go. I think that works a little bit better. And that is a tighter radius, but I think it still needs to be tighter still. So I'm going to select that entire edge, and I'll use the S key to invoke the slide tool. Bring that up a lot more, right about there. Yeah, that's much tighter. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Try that again. Okay, I'll bring that right about up to there. Now you will see it did actually change the curvature here, so I do need to adjust that. So let's go into my right view, and you can see it did adjust that curvature quite a bit, which gives me two choices. I can add another edge loop in here, or I can slide this one up. Let's just slide that one up right about there, and then I will change its scale a little bit, and then use the element move tool to just kind of adjust those, just so this arch is in the way. Now if you're not seeing through your object to backdrop image, remember we have to go and make sure that this background imagery overlay is on, otherwise you won't be able to see through it. You could always, of course, switch to wireframe mode, which makes it really easy to see the backdrop image. And since we're just adjusting the wireframe itself, so that's fine. So I think we're good here. Now let me move back to my default view. Check it out. Yes. And I think we're good there. All right, so I think the next thing we need to do is thicken our chair, because as you can see, if I turn off all of my backdrops here, you can see there is only one side to these polygons, and that's not going to render correctly. So what we can do is we can use, well, there's a couple of things we can do actually. We can thicken this by using the thicken tool, or we can use the bevel tool. And I actually do prefer to use the bevel tool for thickening. So I'm going to click on that, and that activates the tool, and I'm going to bring up the properties. I'll just hit the K key there, and that'll bring up the properties panel. Let's just grab the blue handle here. Oops, I didn't pin that, did I? There we go, pin that. There we go. Click on the blue handle and just drag that up. And you can see it thickens the chair quite a bit. So how thick do I want that? 24 millimeters? Maybe not quite that much. Maybe 16 millimeters is good. I'm just guessing here based on my reference images, but that looks pretty good. Now, the edges here are kind of rounded off, as you can see, and I want to keep them pretty sharp. So I'm going to add more segments to this, and I'm going to do this as, let's try 3 segments. And you can see that sharpens that edge right up. So now, the other thing we need to do is be sure we click on the Thicken Polygon feature right there. There we go. And now that added an inside grouping. Now the other thing we noticed too is when we thickened it, it rounded these corners quite a bit, much more than the actual object has. You can see these corners are pretty tight right there, and we want to make sure we keep that same quality. And how do we do that? Well, we can go ahead and add another holding edge, and I will go to my edge tool, add loop, and with symmetry still on, I'm going to click right there, and I'm just going to drag that down quite a bit. I'm going to go to my side view to see how much that changed my profile setting. I'll use the wireframe view, and that didn't change it too much. That's pretty good actually. So if I just wanted to tweak this a little bit, I could grab this guy and just pull him out just a little. Maybe bring this guy down. Actually, let's just bring that up way up there and then bring all of those down. There we go. And looking pretty good. And let's go back to my default view here. And I want to now look at the back view. And let's go from perspective to back. And I want to look at these corners as well. So again, maybe I need to tweak those a little bit. Hit the T key. Excuse me, the T, not the W. And just bring that over here about like that. And I think that's working for me. And again, I could probably bring these down a little bit here so that they are touching the ground. All right. All right, so I think we're at the point where we can actually put the pretty in the picture. That is to say, add some material textures and lighting, and go to town with rendering our chair. Now, since this is a carbon fiber chair, at least the original design is for carbon fiber, we're going to add carbon fiber material to our chair. But before we do that, we have to actually add something called a UV map. If you're not familiar with those, UV maps allow textured materials or patterned materials to wrap around your object correctly. So any kind of material pattern you're going to need a UV map for. And this object, we really didn't create a UV map as we went. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Now I can go over to the UV tab at the top here and get all my UV tools and everything in one place. But I'm going to stay in the Modo tab, and I'm just going to jump over to the UV toolbox, which is that second one right there. And let's open up a UV panel here, UV viewport panel. And first thing we want to do is make sure that we have an empty texture. If you have something on that texture, which you might, you can either go ahead and do new, or go down here where it says delete UVs and just delete any existing UVs on that panel, because Modo sometimes tries to build UVs as you go, and inevitably they're always wrong. So anyway, so let's go over to here, and I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to zoom in real close, and we're going to see this edge right here near the bottom, right on the corner there. I'm going to double click that, and that will highlight that edge that wraps all the way around the chair. And you can think of this as a seam line for us, where we're going to split our model into two halves, an upper and a lower half, and as if you took a pair of scissors and just cut it along that seam line. And then we're going to flatten it out, because UV maps obviously need to be flat. So with that edge selected, I'm going to go over here where it says UV unwrap and relax. I'm going to click on that and click in the viewport, give it a second, and I come up with this sort of pattern. Now, if your pattern doesn't look like this, let's go ahead and look at some of these settings we should probably set. So I'll bring up the tool properties with the K key. I'll pin it right there. And I have a method of conformal as opposed to angle based. UV seam is the selected edges, and the iterations is 500, and that's pretty much all we need. These are pretty much default settings, so you shouldn't have to play with those. The only real setting that you're going to be playing with is the iterations right here, and you might have to crank those up to get that sort of flat view right there. So with that, the other thing I want to do is I'm going to hit the escape key to drop the tool and to drop the selection on the edges, and I'm just going to go over here where it says fit right there. Click on that. I'm going to key in the entire UV map, key proportions, and I'll click OK. And that just positions those in the middle and scales those up a little bit to fill out as much of that area as possible. All right, so that's all we need to do for that. So the next thing I think we need to do is go ahead and add a ground plane to our scene so the chair has something to sit on. I'm going to go to my geometry right here. Unit primitives in a new mesh, and let's just add a plane. Very simple. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. It doesn't matter if you're in polygons or item mode, and I'm going to hit the R key to resize that. It'll bring up my gizmo. I'm just going to grab the little center part of the gizmo right there and just move my mouse to the left, just click and drag, and that's going to scale up that ground plane. All right, I think that's plenty big. Now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and start adding some materials to our models. So the first one, since I already have the plane selected here, I'm going to hit the M key to bring up the materials requester there, and I'm going to call this the ground. And click on that. And then the chair, we need to add a material to that too. Since that's the only thing on that layer, you don't really need to click all the polygons or highlight all the polygons if you don't want to. And I'm just going to hit the material M key to bring up the material requester again, and we'll call this Ray Chair. There we go. All right, so if I jump over to my shader tab, I can see I have my two materials in there, and I can open that up and just change the color if I want. And let's deselect that and change that to any color I want. All right. I'm just going to go back to here. Now let's go ahead and add a carbon fiber material to this chair, since the original model or the original chair itself is actually carbon fiber. So how do we do that? Well, that's easy enough. Let's go over to the open up this little panel right here. Click these guys, that little button. That's going to bring up your materials browser. All right. I should also mention that we should probably kick in the preview render as well up here. Usually your window here is kind of a 16:9 aspect ratio. And what I often do is I'll go into the render window there, and where it says frame height and width, I'll usually change the height to some number like 1280 or 1500 or something around there. That'll give me a taller aspect ratio, so it better matches the viewport window size, and that gives me more viewability of that render. Okay, so let's look for some materials. Let's open this guy up here by clicking on that. That's our search or filter panel there. And in the search bar, I'm just going to enter carbon. Okay, so as you can see, it filtered out a bunch of, or found a bunch of the carbon materials for me. And I'm going to scroll down. Now, if you don't see very many carbon fiber materials, go right down to the cloud assets here, and you can select one of the assets from the Foundry's assets cloud server. So that's very, very helpful in finding materials sometimes that you don't have locally on your system. So, all right. So again, if you don't see this with the search bar, again, you can go here and go up to cloud assets and look for that as well. So anyway, I'm going to choose, I think, of this grouping. Let's see. I think this is the one I like. And I'm just going to drag it over and put it right inside or underneath that. Since I already downloaded it, it says it already exists. So I'm going to say yes, yes to all. And it's already installed on my system. So there we go. Now we can see a carbon fiber pattern on the chair, but it's a bit big. If you look real closely, you can see the actual fibers are huge. And if you know anything about carbon fiber, they're very, very small thread weaves in a carbon fiber. So if we look at the material mask properties here, and if we open that up, we can see all these images. And these images need to be all scaled. But rather than scale each one individually, we can scale them all as one group. And that is with these settings right here. So I'm going to leave everything selected, go to scale, and I'm going to scale those to like 10%. All right. Now you can see the carbon fiber material actually fits the scale of the chair much better. So that little feature prevented me from actually having to go and individually scale each one of these images. So now let's look at the ground plane. What do we want to do for that? I think I want to do concrete. And the one that I liked after playing around with this a little bit was down here, and it was one of the pebbles, I think. So after a little searching, I found one I liked, which is Concrete Pebbles 3, but of course you can experiment with whichever one you like. And I'm just going to drag it and drop it inside of the ground. And there we are. And again, if I zoom out on this a little bit, you can see that the concrete is way too big for the scale. And again, under this material mask, I'll go down to scale. And I think maybe about 40%. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, the last thing we need to do is add an environment. And so I'm going to click on this little pop-up window here. I'm going to go all the way up to environments. All right, and I see I have some outdoor environments. And we can choose that, or let's see what we have in image-based lighting. We have some environments here as well that we can use for backgrounds. But, well, you can experiment with them. Now these you can just double click on these and they will go right into the environment material node. So I'm just going to go down here to the bottom. Let's outdoor spherical. Let's do that one. As you can see, it changed the lighting on my scene a bit. I have a little bit of a sunset reflection in there as well. And yeah, it's pretty nice. So just play around and experiment with different materials and different environments and see what you come up with.